Welcome to the show today. I am Jim Harold, and this is the inaugural edition of Jim Harold's Campfire Deep Dive Live. What we're going to do on this series is basically bring in a great campfire storyteller from the past and have them do a deep dive, and you can ask your questions. Now, campfire stories based on our podcast, Jim Harold's Campfire, can be stories about ghosts, cryptids, UFOs, or just plain old head scratchers. And they're always interesting, they're always real, they're always fun and fascinating. And today is no exception. We have experiencer Michael on the line from California. And he told a story a few years back on the campfire that I absolutely loved, and I thought it would make a great story for our first Campfire Deep Dive Live. Michael, welcome to the show today.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, I want to say a big hello to all of our viewers out there. We appreciate it and glad you found it. And if you want to get more videos like this one, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel at youtube.com/Jim Harold. We're going to be doing this weekly along with a lot of interviews. I think you'll enjoy it, so I hope you will stay tuned. So, Michael, you called back a few years ago, and I guess it all started with an estate sale. Could you share your story with us again?
Yes. My wife and I had, for a long period of time, been managing apartment buildings and finally just kind of had to get out of it and managed to move into a place that we really like that was built in the 1920s, like an old West Hollywood townhouse. And we wanted to decorate it with things that more fit the apartment than all the IKEA white things we had in the old ones. So we hit a lot of estate sales. And we ended up in one out in the San Fernando Valley. And it was that we bought a couple of dressers and I loaded them in the back of this old Volvo I had, and I was backing into the carport to load them in. I saw someone standing behind the car in the rearview mirror, and I stopped and I turned around and there's nobody there, and I got out, and leaning up against the wall of the carport was a big shipping crate. I was like, oh, what's that? And another lady, the lady who was running the estate sale, came out and says, hey, I'll give you a good price on that if you want it. And I'm like, what is it? So she like took a piece of the wood off and peeled back the packing paper, and it was like the corner of this mirror. I was like, wow, that's cool. It was really kind of damaged. It's like, looks like a Roger Corman movie. This is great. But it was huge. And I was like, there's no way I can hang this on a wall, and it's just too big. But there were a couple other things at the estate sale I was kind of interested in, but were just way out of my budget. But I exchanged business cards with the lady, and the next morning got up and my wife and I were talking about some of the other things we wanted to buy. And I was like, nah, it's not in the budget. We'll just have to, because we suddenly had this huge place and we had nothing to put in it. And then my phone rang, and I answered. She goes, hi, it's Linda. I was like, who? She was the lady from the yard sale. She's like, I've got those chairs you wanted, and there's this. She used a lot of expletives. She was really colorful. She was in an argument with somebody about these things I wanted to buy, and she had wanted like $500 for them originally. She goes, I'll give them to you for $50. Some chairs, and I'm like, $50 each. She goes, no, just $50. I'll give you both of them. This guy here is totally disrespecting me, and he's lowballing me, and she's arguing with him. I'll give them to you for $50 because I don't want him to have them. I'm like, okay. She goes, and that mirror that was in the carport, if you want it, you can get it out of here. I think you're the one that's supposed to have it. I'm like, okay. So
interesting comment.
yeah. And it's like, thanks. But we took it, and I mean, the thing's huge, and it's meant to be hung horizontally, but the walls just couldn't support it. So we set it up vertically and had it in the corner of the living room where we were living. And during that time, I was working kind of late nights into the early morning at like a restaurant club, and my wife was working super early in the morning. So I would get home at 1 or 1:30 in the morning. She would have to get up at 3, and she has a very difficult time getting up in the morning. So for weeks, I would go to bed at like 2. I'd wake up at 3 and make coffee and have a cup of coffee with her. And then I would sleep on the couch, which was in the living room where the mirror was. And one morning, it was the same routine. I would sort of curl up on my side, and one of the cats would sleep behind my legs. And I was laying on the couch, and all of a sudden the couch shook. And I'm like, oh, earthquake. And I sat up and I looked, and there was a crowd of people in the living room. And I'm thinking, what's going on? I'm dazed. I'm just coming out of sleep. And it was like 11 people, something, it's standing in the room. And there was one man that was standing sort of in the forefront. He was very much in focus, but everyone else was kind of blurry. And he had like uh, kind of brown hair, a little bit slicked back. He was scruffy,
Hmm.
had on a vest and like an ascot thing, and was wearing big boots. And he just stood there with his hands behind the back and looked at me. And I was like, "What the?" A lot of expletives. "What are you doing?" And he just stood there. And then there was this really brief conversation. The thing, it was weird. It's like his mouth didn't move, but I was having a conversation. Like, what the F are you doing in my house? And he just kind of looked at me and goes, "We came with a mirror." And what? He goes, "We came with a mirror." And I just kind of obviously in shock and what the hell's going on? It was really quick. And then he says, "We came with a mirror. We love to dance. We love to have parties. We love to watch ourselves dance in that mirror." And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? Whatever. What are you doing? And he just looks at me and he says, "We never got our last dance." And then he leaned in really close to me on the couch and he says, "That's where you come in." And I like do
Oh.
this thing and I'm like, "Dad, what is this?" And then the room's empty and I'm like, "Wow, that's the coolest dream I've ever had. That's the most vivid dream I've ever had. That's great. I'm gonna have to tell my wife about that." And that's what a great story. I can like because I live in Hollywood and all that. I'm like, well, maybe I can turn this into something. Maybe that's a great thing, and kind of blew it off as just a really vivid nightmare. Then my cat sits up, and this is a cat that's not bothered by anything, and starts hissing at the mirror.
Oh.
Jolts back, and she runs upstairs, and she hid for the rest of the day. And I told my wife about it. She goes, "Oh, that's cool." Doesn't just nonplussed. And then I think like the next week I was at work and she was at home and I get a text. She's like, "Are you home?" I'm like, "No." She says, "There's somebody upstairs." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She says, "It sounds like there's a bunch of people upstairs." Because at that point we had taken the mirror and we had moved it up to our second bedroom, which was an
Right.
office. She goes, "It sounds like there's a bunch of people moving around up there." And I'm like, "Don't go up there." She goes, "No, no, I'm going to go up." And she goes up. She's like, "There's nobody up there." And so for weeks, at different times of night. It was usually like 9:15ish. You would just hear it would sound like boots and people moving around upstairs. And it's like it's a townhouse. So there's nobody above us, and next to us was a lady who at that time lived by herself, and she mostly stayed downstairs. So, and we didn't share other walls, and it was just really strange. So that was like 2008. For the next for the next few years, um, some some really disconcerting things happened in the house. You'd hear the noises, and then like my wife would text, "I just saw somebody walk into the office." And it's like, what are you talking about? Um, so I ended up being in a class, and the woman I was working on a project in class for invited me over to work on what we're doing. And then she mentions ghosts and that she and her then fiance, now husband, were amateur ghost hunters. And I was like, "Oh, I had this weird thing happen with this mirror." And then he comes out and he's like, "Oh, dude, I should come over and bring all my ghost hunting equipment." I'm like, "Okay." And I'd seen some of it on um, different ghost hunting TV shows and was always like, eh. And I'm figuring he's going to come over and it's going to be a camera and this and stuff. Comes over and he built these in the picture that I sent on the sides of the mirror. You see little things with batteries on it. He built EMF pumps to sort of increase the uh, electromagnetic field. There's a, I think it's called a EMF meters on top of the mirror, He
Right.
had something called a geophone. He had just everything, cameras and all that. And he was there for a few hours, and it was interesting. And he left, and I didn't hear from him. So I contacted him. I was like, "So did you get anything? Was there any?" And I'm hoping he's going to say, "No, there's nothing. Go see a therapist. You're crazy, or it's your imagination. All these things that have happened." So I'm like, "So did you get anything?" There's nothing, right? Just tell me I need to go check myself in somewhere. He goes, "No, we need to talk." I'm like, Okay." He says, "I'm not going to tell you anything." He goes, "I've done a lot of investigations. I've never gotten so many things so quickly in such a short amount of time.
Hmm.
Um, I'm going to come over. I'm going to play you the first voices that came through." He goes, "I got EVPs all over this." And I'm like, "Okay." Yeah, I feel like he's pulling my leg. So he came over one night, and my wife was there, who was not there the night that we did the investigation. And he sets at his computer and says, "All right, I'm going to play you the first the first voice that came through." And he says, "Going through, I found at least nine different voices that came through." I'm like, still feeling like it's going to be like a joke or whatever. He says, "I'm going to play you the first thing. Don't say anything. I'm going to play it a second time, and then I want you to tell me what you hear. And then I'll play it a third time. We'll listen to it together, and then I'll show you what I wrote down." So we're like, okay, whatever. This is going to be, the usual warbled voices, and that's because we'd use the spirit box, all this stuff. So he plays the first thing, and my wife and I both are just like, "What?" And we looked at each other. He plays it a second time, and he points at us, and he's like, "What did you hear?" And on the recording, you hear him say this, give where we are and who we are. And he says, "Is there anyone here with us?" And it was like immediately, it was just this really, really calm, really calm voice that just says, "We're all demons." And my
Oh.
wife and I looked at each other, and then he plays again. He goes, "That's what I wrote down." He goes, "What do you think?" It's like, this isn't something. I was like, "Let's hear more." It's like it wasn't scary to us because I'm like, okay, so I don't think that if there are demons, I don't think something, from things I'd read is going to just go, "Hey, this is what I am." The room where we were doing the investigation and where the mirror was kind of our office for a theater company we were running, which was called Demon Theater. And like people that worked with us and people that knew it just refer to themselves as demons. Like, we're the demons because it's Demon Theater, um, which is a reference to the person whose writing we were doing. So it kind of had this feeling that it was just this smart aleck saying, "Ah, we're all demons," just. And
Right.
as he kept going through with the recordings, whoever was in the room didn't like him. It was just bizarre. They'd be like, "Oh, you're an a-hole." And then the main male voice would come in and say, "This is Michael's house. We want to talk to Michael." And yeah, I'm hearing this a couple of weeks after, because when
Whoa.
we're in the room doing it, like, you don't hear anything. Um, so there was a lot more on there that would be kind of boring. I was like, okay, he left, and it's like, wow, so that something was really happening. It's not my imagination. Well, then I start getting calls from him that whatever was in our house suddenly was at his house. And some of the things that he described that happened to him were absolutely terrifying, with being held down on the bed. Um, and then we both started having these really weird nightmares, that had some similarities. That was 2014. I don't know what he did, but it suddenly stopped. And I went to a Christmas party at his house, and he's introducing me, and then people are like, "Oh, hey, you're that guy with the mirror." And I was like, "Guy, now I'm this lunatic who thinks he's got a haunted mirror." And that was all anyone was talking about. And I got really kind of frustrated, and came home, and I was like, you know what? I still, despite overwhelming like evidence or experiences that I couldn't explain. I was like, okay, just in case this is something real or is something conscious, I kind of out loud said, it's like, I don't care. Whatever this is, I want it gone. We got to figure it out. If it's just, if I'm having some sort of mental breakdown and what I still couldn't explain the recordings, I want to take care of it. And that night I couldn't sleep. And the next, I'd gone down to sleep on the couch. And then my phone started going off. And it was like a music program that I never used. And I just started playing this song. And I was like, well, I thought I'd set my alarm and I turned it off, went back to sleep, started up again, same part of the song, turned it off, it came back on again. And it was the song by Harry Nilsson, Without You. And the only part
Yeah.
it was play is, I can't live if living is without you. And it would repeat, and I was on my phone. So finally I turned the phone
Oh
off and I was like,
man.
okay. And I'm still like, this is just a coincidence. And then it came on again and I turned it off. Um, a couple of more months go by and things got really dark, um, really unnerving in the house. And I started meeting people that would just come and go, hey, what's happening in your house? I'm like, what are you talking about? How do you know this? Um, and one of the job that I had, there was a gentleman who had gone to seminary and very, very Catholic, and another woman who was a lifelong spiritualist. And they both were like, so what's happening? And I sort of told them, and they gave me different advice. And like I said, it kept getting darker. And one night, um, we were sitting downstairs, and it's just like, this has to stop. We just, if these other two people that are telling us these things, it's like, if this is true, it has to go, whatever this is. And I didn't have answers. And I said it, and all of a sudden I had this burning feeling on the side, and I thought I'd been bitten. I was like, and I went over and I had these scratches down the side of my neck,
Oh man.
and and I was like, did I scratch myself? Is it the wool sweater? What is this? And or do I have? And I felt it. It was swollen. And I said, do I have a bite, a spider bite, or you know? And my wife came and she goes, oh my god! And she took a picture of it, which I can send you if you want it. But it was just these scratches all down the side of my neck, and they were really swollen, and it just felt it was like almost if someone set a curling iron or something on my neck. It was really hot. So it's 1:30 in the morning, and I texted the gentleman, um, the very Catholic friend, and said, so what is this? He's like, just be calm. He says, did you scratch yourself? I'm like, I don't have fingernails. He goes, it's okay, just be calm. Just try to go to bed. Don't be afraid. Just call me in the morning. Let me know what it looks like, and we'll go from there. Because we had talked about ghosts
Hmm.
and such. So the next morning, I get up and it was gone, and it was weird because it had been like bright red, swollen like little blisters, and it was little blood spots in it. The next morning, I got up and it was gone. So I said, "Oh, it's gone. Maybe I just scratched it." He was like, "You need to come meet me tomorrow." Like, what? He goes, "If it was still there, uh, it's something you would have done to yourself absentmindedly and just noticed. The fact that it's gone tells me it's something else." And I'm like, okay. So I went and met him where we were working, and he gave me holy water, copies of the prayer to Saint Michael the Archangel, and then what he referred to as a layperson's rite of exorcism, like something you can do to cleanse a house. And he gave me all these pointers on things to do. He says, you, I know you don't, even though you have these things happening, you don't really believe these things. If this is something very dark, you need to start documenting everything. He says, I can get you in touch with someone at the Catholic Church, but they're going to need at least 6 months of well documented things. And he started laying out all these things. And I'm like, this is nuts. Um, I'm sorry, I'm rambling. I haven't talked
No,
about this
that's
part of
okay.
it.
Go ahead and tell your
Um,
story.
and I, I did the things that he recommended I do, and I'd also tried things that the spiritualist woman was telling me to do, and some of the that is just too maybe a little too strange or personal to
Okay.
talk about.
Okay.
But I did this did this cleanse, and I like lined the lower frame of the mirror with salt and all this stuff. I'm like, this is nuts. And I'm like, okay, yeah, but this whole thing is nuts. And I'm still telling myself, it's like, oh, this is, this is mostly your imagination, whatever. Um, and that sort of cleansing session was pretty intense. Not like, there's not things flying around the room, but it's just this weird oppressive feeling. And then someone felt like someone was blowing on my neck, and it felt like being touched while doing this St. Michael's prayer and this rite of exorcism throughout the house with white can. It was just and holy water everywhere. And I'm like, I'm not Rod Steiger. It was just strange. But after I did that, it was things were very calm. And I mean, we ended up moving away from that apartment. The building was sold, and we had to move out. And obviously, kept the mirror. And nothing really has happened. And at one point, prior to talking with my devoutly Catholic friend and all these people, my wife had randomly, at where she was working, met this guy who came up and started telling her all these things about herself and about me. And then it turned out he was a psychic and all this. And he's like, so tell me about your house. And she hadn't told anybody at work what was happening. But he came over and walked through the house, and he saw the mirror. He's like, cool mirror, man. Like, thanks. He goes, he goes, he goes, and I told him some things that had been going on. Some of the really, the terrifying things.
Right.
And he's like, I think you should keep it. He goes, it's not the mirror, man. It's you. He goes, wherever you go, you have other things happen. I'm like, yeah, but it's like I have an active imagination, or I listen to Campfire too much, or whatever. And then, he walked through and did this weird cleansing thing in the house with an iron skillet, salt and alcohol that he set on fire, and walked through the house and would turn different color. It was like just
And
weird.
don't try this
And
at
for a
home,
couple
folks.
of
Don't
months,
set anything on fire
yeah,
at home. Okay.
yeah. And that's what I'm thinking. It's like, do fire extinguisher. But after he had done that, it had died down, but then it came up again. And particularly when my now really good friend who brought over all the equipment, that was when things really ramped up. It became intense. And like talking about it, ghosts would a lot of times with different jobs, like if you're waiting tables or you're working on a film show, whatever, you have these really long hours and a lot of downtime, and the topic will come up, or weird things will happen where you're working. Like where I worked, weird things happened all the time. So I would sort of mention what happened, thinking if people were like, "Oh, you're nuts," and they would just go, "That's the creepiest thing I've ever heard." But the thing is, it's like the initial incident, which is probably the most interesting with the conversation. I was shocked, but I didn't feel afraid or in danger. Um, it was things that happened later that started to feel dangerous. So I never, I don't know, that's a little vague, but I guess that's kind of the mirror in a nutshell. Oh, there's one other, like talking about weird coincidences, because I always
Sure.
just in my mind go to, it's your imagination, or I write things off as a coincidence. But sometime before he came over with all the equipment, there was this really weird feeling in the apartment, and it just, I got this really uneasy feeling. I was like, all right, I might be going insane, but let's go talk to an empty room with a mirror in it. So I went up to where the office was, and that's where all our books and things were. And I was like, okay, I'm crazy. It's like, so if there's anybody here, I think this is all BS. There's nothing. Right now, you need to give me some kind of sign that there's something here.
Mm-hmm.
And we had rescue cats. So one of my crazy cat comes running in and goes up to runs by the bookshelf, and a book falls off the shelf, just one. And I pick it up, and it's this weird book called the Encyclopedia of Ancient and Forbidden Knowledge. It's this thing. And this was something someone had just given us with the whole thing, and it fell open, and it's just a coincidence, but I don't know if you can see it. This
There
is the
are no
page.
coincidences.
This is the page that it
Oh.
opened to, and and
Using the magic mirror, folks, if you missed it.
yeah, and I still was like, oh, come on, that's too on the nose. I'm still like writing it off because
Come on, you're being a little
to
melodramatic here, mirror. You're
yeah, well, and then I'm like, that's so on the nose. Come on, this is so obvious. And I was like, this is just a coincidence. I mean, just as easily could have, knocked down a book about knitting, but it just happened. So I still wrote it off, and that it was that page. I was like, had I opened, was that the last
wow.
when they gave me the book? Had I opened it to that, and just like because it fell out, it just happened to open that? Maybe that's what it is. So it's still, there's always this for me. There's always just this um, almost dismissive attitude towards the experiences, because when there were a lot of things happening at once, I just found myself being really almost on edge all the time. It's like every little thing
Right.
is you start to and then you start to create all these connections. Like, oh, this ties together. It's like, no, these are things that happened.
So at
Um,
this point, after that though, after that book falling out, was that it, or was there more? Did more happen, or
no,
was that
that
like the last gasp?
no, the book thing was prior to when
Oh,
the
okay,
investigator came over, and that's
gotcha.
when like things blew up. And I actually uh, spoke with him this past Saturday night. He moved, and I was like, did this stuff happen?" He's like, yeah, it happened. And he told me a little more about his experiences uh, in his house after mine. And it was, it's such a strange thing, because it was like, oh, this is exciting. This is really interesting. But then you almost find yourself becoming a little obsessive. It's like, I got my life to worry about. I need to work. I need to keep trying to pay rent. I have to try, and you get
Yeah,
focused on
sure.
regular life. And so much happened over the course of, from what 2018 was when it first spoke up until 2015. And after that cleansing thing, it's kind of like, it's just done. And it's kind of like, okay, I don't want to read about this stuff anymore. It's like I just need to separate my mind from it. And I was in New York working, and um, stuck inside because it was blizzards all the time. And it was just on Facebook, and this random Facebook page I'd never been on popped up called Edge of Fear, Realm of the Unknown. I was like, oh, this is interesting. And I started looking through it, and I commented. And a gentleman named Roland, who sort of ran it, contacted me. And over the years, Roland and Sonny, we sort of talk experiences. And they introduced me to a podcast called the Haunted Chronicles with
Hmm.
Jimmy Pedanito. I was like, oh, and I started listening to that. And then we became Facebook friends, and ended up sort of, before I talked about the mirror with you, there was another, really bizarre kind of like, what in the hell thing that I'd spoken with him about, him and William J. Hall. And
Yeah, William J. Hall. Yeah, I've interviewed him. Yeah.
they, and that experience, they ended up putting out a book a couple of years ago called Phantom Messages, by Jimmy and William. and then the story I'd done on his podcast ended up there, and I was like, okay, let me, I guess I can sort of talk more publicly about this weird mirror experience. And I was really surprised at just people seemed really interested. And I hadn't really, and that was, I think, was it 2017 or 2018?
Something like that.
Something like that.
When you came on
Yeah.
the show,
And
yeah.
then after that, I was like, I need to put it behind. And then it came up again a few months ago. And then being in quarantine for this long period of time, it's sort of thinking about all of it. And I think maybe the most troubling thing is like there's no closure. There's no um, neat little button on it. There's no explanation. It's kind of, and I think the way my wife put it was, I don't know why these things just happen. Yeah, it's like it ends up being like I went to the grocery store yesterday. It just becomes it just
Part
sort
of
of
everyday
everyday life for
life.
a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a couple of things. Spooktators, folks who are watching, thank you for watching. And please type your questions in for Michael. We'll take questions for about 10 minutes here. Michael, quick question for you. Ruth was wondering, why did you keep the mirror? And I think that's a fair question.
Um, Honestly, I just like the mirror. I don't know. It just became a sort of fixture in the house. And after all of the different experiences and the cleanse, all that activity kind of stopped. And I, I guess I feel there's nothing. I just feel attached to it. I like it, and
And it's right
um,
by the way, in case you folks watching haven't noticed, the mirror is right behind him. So right
yeah,
there
I
it
don't know.
is. That's it. Yeah,
As
we
you can
can see it pretty well. We can see it
reflection
pretty well.
into like
Yeah.
this tiny apartment. Um, yeah, I really liked it. And there's still that part of me that's like, no, this has nothing. This is all nonsense. Even though,
Well, somebody said,
um,
Michael, somebody said denial isn't just a river.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And
uh,
denial isn't just a river. And there was when things got weird, I through that Facebook page, I ended up being in contact with some like paranormal investigators and people who've written big books. And I'm like, I just don't know. And they're like, look, there are no atheists in foxholes or haunted houses. There's something else. Just deal with it. But maybe the keeping it was maybe just when a couple of people had said it's like, look, you can get rid of it, but these things are going to happen to you either way. Um, just shut it down. It's still difficult to um, kind of wrap my head around and say this really happened. I still have that. It's a lot of it's just coincidence and imagination. Ignore the 3 hours of voices. Ignore these other things that happened. That's a really long answer. I kept it because I really like it, and hopefully the next place I move, I'll actually be able to hang it how it's supposed to hang. It's just too big to put horizontally anywhere.
Now, Marsha wants to know, would you ever buy more items like this again? Would you go to, or do you go to estate sales, yard sales, those kind of things to pick up antique goods?
Right now, just I would, and we always have, and then because of the other things we do, we have to sometimes buy antiques or whatever. So I have no problem with it. Just where we live now is so much smaller, so there's really no room to fit anything in. But we have a lot of things that we've been given or that we've gotten at estate sales. So I'm not I'm not really worried about it. I kind of hope that if I pick something up and I shouldn't take it, I'll get like a bad feeling, but I guess I just find out after the fact. But no, I have no qualms really about it.
We have a few more questions here. They're coming in now. Did you keep the EVP, and would you have someone investigate the house again?
The house now, we the building sold. The owner passed away, and her family sold the building, so it's now been bought by a developer who is kind of gutting everything and taking this 1920s shell and kind of modernizing it. Um, so I imagine if anyone were to move in there and things would happen, they might be up for it, but I wouldn't want to approach whoever moved into, or if anyone ever buys it, is going to move
Sure.
into what's now going to be a condo and be like, hey, guess what? You just dropped $900,000 on a Hellgate or whatever, but
JT. So the answer is no. You're probably not, because you're not around that building anymore.
we moved about a mile away.
Yeah.
So, and there were a few other people that lived in the building that had some interesting stories. But I don't think they really related. It was a few years of some interesting exchanges. And that's, I think that the things with the building are a whole other thing that just happened to sort of go on at the same time as this bizarro.
JT wants to know, did you ever go back to the estate sale to see where it came from? I think the estate sale was ending. Wasn't it like the last day or something?
Yeah, it was. It was sort of the last weekend, and the only time I went back was like we'd gone on a Saturday, and then that Sunday was when she called me, and I went and got the chairs that I wanted. And then I think it was the following Wednesday, I had a friend with a truck who helped me sort of get the mirror and figure it out. And at that point, everything was basically gone because they were selling the house. I guess it was the woman's great grandmother. And I just felt, I when things started happening, I felt weird about calling her and going, hey, so it's
sure.
When you talk about the stuff, it's a lot of times it's like, you're a loon. And I just.
But you're not at all. Now, Mike Cruz wants to know, have you researched where it came from? Someone else asked also, do you have an idea of the date? So do you have any information on the provenance of the mirror?
I don't. Like, I tried to sort of see if there's any markings or anything on the back, and there's nothing. And I'm like, oh, maybe I should contact like Bonhams or one of these places and try to find out something. But there's a part of me that almost doesn't want to know. Mm-hmm. Because it's like, okay, if I find out, then that makes it even more real. Now it's just this kind of weird experience in this story that, take it or leave it. But I haven't been able to find out. The woman did mention that a lot of the things that were in this house had actually, my exchanges with her were kind of brief, and mostly she was swearing at this other guy. But I think a lot of it had come from her great grandmother's house in Virginia, and then they had moved out here and brought all of it, and they were in this little place in like Toluca Lake, which is not fancy. So it's Burbank. So it's not this lake house, it's this little like bungalow style house that was just packed full of antiques. And this thing was packed up. It was still in the shipping crate from whenever, and it hadn't been announced.
Oh, we're losing your audio for a second there, so I'm not quite sure what happened. I'm going to queue up the next question, and hopefully we can get Michael back. Michael, we appear to have lost your audio for a minute, so what I'm going to do is ask you to give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Can you hear me? Okay, I can't hear you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the one shot of me, and I'm going to ask you to duck out and duck back in, if you would. Could you do that for me? Okay. All right. Well, this is live, folks. This is the kind of thing that happens occasionally. So we're going to ask Michael to just duck out and duck back in so he can take more of your questions and see, just for fun, we'll see. Can you hear me now? Michael, can we hear you by any chance? Yeah, we cannot hear you. So we're going to ask you to duck out, just disconnect and come back in that same link we gave you. So I'm just going to do this and we'll wait for Michael to come back. And while we're waiting, I'm glad to take any comments or anything. Let's see. JT says it's time to go to the Antique Roadshow. I like that comment. I like that comment a lot. Villa says mirrors most certainly can be a portal for spirits. Great show. Let's see. I want to see if there's some questions here. There was one here from Matrig6. To Jim, as I know your wife's Italian, my Italian grandparents born in the 1880s used to keep their mirrors covered. And let me bring Michael back in. Used to keep their mirrors covered to protect themselves from evil. Have you heard of this custom? Yeah, I think I have. I'll have to ask Dar if that's something that she knew of her family doing. Let's see if we can get Michael back on the broadcast here. Let's see. Let's bring him in and hopefully we will get him in. Let's see if he is in now. Guest is in the green room. We're going to bring him in and hopefully he is there. Let's see if he's there. Michael, are you there? Can you hear us?
I can hear you.
And we can hear you. You're back.
Okay,
see?
Great.
There
Good.
we did it. We did it live and we were able to paraphrase a internet meme. We did it live and
Okay, sorry.
and we're back. So we've got a few more questions.
Maybe the
mirror did it. Maybe. Now we've got quite a few questions here. I'd like to go through them rapid fire if we could. If you could give them kind of brief answers, that way we can get to as many people as possible. Okay. So let's start off with Chikova. Chikova wanted to say, when the haunting was transferred over to your friend's house, were strange things happening at both your places simultaneously?
No, it was all pretty much at his place.
Gotcha.
Interestingly.
Gotcha.
Which is
now this next question may be too personal. If you don't want to get into it, that's fine. Christine wants to know what, if any, your religious beliefs are. And again, that's up to you whether you answer that or not.
I think maybe I'll not.
Okay.
Maybe I'll not answer
fair.
it. I'm sorry.
That's perfectly.
I like
somebody said maybe the mirror will break in the next move. Sorry, not sorry.
Please don't.
Well, you don't want it to break after all this. No. And I think you covered this, but what was the blessing that seemed to fix the issue?
I had been given, he'd given me copies of the prayer to Saint Michael, the Archangel. And then there was another that was, the way he explained it, it's a rite of exorcism that can be done by a layperson to help sort of clear a space. And those were the things I did. And it was combined with, he'd given me holy water. And he says the important thing is to speak authoritatively. And just no matter how stupid you feel or whatever, just keep saying these prayers. And where this tells you to do the holy water, do it. And that seemed to take care of things.
Jennifer said, the mirror is over it. Too many questions. And Tanya says, while we're waiting, hit the like button. So thank you so much for that. Let me see if we've got any more. Delta Man 80 says, was the mirror a witness to evil, homicide, domestic abuse, bad juju of any sort? I wonder, that could be. That's an interesting question. Have you ever seen eyes in the mirror? I guess you saw eyes in the people you saw, but no separate eyes.
No, I did not.
Jennifer says, Michael reminds me of a younger Peter Gallagher. There you go.
Thank you.
Famous actor.
I have to brush my eyebrows up more. Yeah. Yeah.
Need a little more gray there. Heather and some other people have pointed this out. My family always believed in covering mirrors when someone dies. Something about spirits being trapped, and I think that will do it. One last question. Stefan 87 wants to know. Hi, Michael. You said the man who spoke to you was dressed scruffily. Were the other people dressed similarly?
Um, he, they were kind of blurry, but the women looked like they had on dresses like with corsets and bustles on the back, and the gentleman was kind of well dressed, but it was a little tattered, like a white shirt, vest, and this almost like an ascot. But his
Mm-hmm.
hair was slicked back, and he was a little scruffy, and then he had on uh, boots that it's like his feet are dirty, like it's just dusty, and it just had this kind of almost got the impression of like late 1800s American West was just kind of the vibe I got,
Yeah.
but I don't know how that ties into the
Mm,
mirror. I don't know,
interesting.
and just strange.
Well, Michael, I want to thank you for being so generous with your time and with the audience. And if you hang on a moment, we'll debrief after the live is over. And I thank you very much for your time today. And I
Okay,
thank our
thank you.
listeners for all their questions.
Thanks.
And thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you do this. Subscribe to my YouTube channel at youtube.com/Jim Harold. We're going to be doing a deep dive every week for several weeks. We're going to see if it's something you enjoy. And if in fact it catches on, we'll just keep doing them and doing them and doing them. And if you are new to these stories, check out my podcast, Jim Harold's Campfire, wherever you find your podcasts. And thank you so much. We certainly appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. Thanks to Sylvia for the super sticker. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. And we'll talk to you next time. And as I always say, stay safe. And you know the rest. Stay spooky. Bye-bye, everybody.